Behind the painted smile and colorful attire of Pogo the Clone lay one of America's most chilling secrets. John Wayne Gacy, a respected community figure and beloved entertainer, used his clown persona to mask a dark and twisted reality. While many remember him for his jovial performances at children's parties, few realize the sinister duality that defined his existence. In our previous video, we delved deep into the horrifying details of Gacy's crimes, uncovering the extent of his brutality. If you haven't explored that unsettling journey yet, check out the link in the description below to understand the full scope of his atrocities. Today, we shift our focus to the man behind the mask. What drove a seemingly ordinary man to become a notorious serial killer? Join us as we explore the psychological and societal factors that transformed John Wayne Gacy from a community clown into a symbol of pure evil. Part 1: The Two Faces of John. When innocence masks depravity. Let's rewind the clock, stripping away the layers of time to a seemingly ordinary life in the heartland of America. We find ourselves in Des Plaines, Illinois, a quiet suburb where children played freely and neighbors greeted each other with a wave and a smile. Here, amidst the backdrop of picket fences and manicured lawns, lived John Wayne Gacy. To the outside world, he was the epitome of the American dream, the friendly neighbor, the successful businessman, the life of the party. He was a man of many hats, quite literally. He was a successful construction contractor, a man who built things, a creator. He was active in local politics, a Democrat precinct captain, shaking hands and kissing babies, embodying civic duty. He was a man who threw lavish parties, a generous host, the center of attention. But his most well-known persona, the one that would ultimately become his chilling epitaph, was Pogo the Clown. Imagine this: a large, jovial man, squeezed into a brightly colored, homemade clown suit. His face, painted white with exaggerated features, a wide, red-lipped grin, circles around his eyes, and a shock of bright orange hair. In this guise, he was Pogo, a character he created, a persona he embodied with unsettling dedication. He performed at children's hospitals, at charity events, at birthday parties, bringing, or so it seemed, joy and laughter wherever he went. Children flocked to him, drawn to his seemingly harmless antics, his balloon animals, his silly jokes. He was a figure of fun, a source of innocent merriment. But beneath the grace paint, behind the forced smile, a darkness festered. A darkness so profound, so absolute, that it would eventually consume him, transforming him into something monstrous, something inhuman. The laughter he elicited from children would become a sickening counterpoint to the silent screams of his victims. The bright colors of his costume would become stained with the blood of the innocent. The contrast is jarring, isn't it? The cognitive dissonance is almost unbearable. How could these two realities coexist within one man? How could the hand that twisted balloons into playful shapes also snuff out young lives? It's a question that defies easy answers, a question that forces us to confront the unsettling truth about the human capacity for deception, for compartmentalization, for the most extreme forms of hypocrisy. Gacy wasn't merely hiding his true nature, he was living a double life, a carefully constructed performance that fooled everyone, including, perhaps, at times, himself. He was a master of disguise, not just in the literal sense of his clown costume, but in the metaphorical sense of his entire persona. He was a chameleon, blending seamlessly into his surroundings, reflecting back to society the image it wanted to see: the successful businessman, the generous neighbor, the fun, loving clown. This duality, this ability to compartmentalize his life into such drastically opposing compartments, is the first key to understanding the enigma of John Wayne Gacy. He wasn't just a monster, he was a monster in plain sight, a monster hiding behind a mask of normalcy, a mask he wore with such chilling conviction that it fooled everyone around him. He was, in essence, the wolf in sheep's clothing, or perhaps more accurately, the wolf in clown's clothing. A chilling thought, isn't it? To realize that the monster may not be lurking in the shadows, but standing right beside you, smiling, offering you a balloon. Part 2: Seeds of Darkness. The forging of a monster. To truly grasp the magnitude of Gacy's transformation, we must venture further back, beyond the clown makeup and the political rallies, to the crucible of his childhood. For it was here, in the formative years of his life, that the seeds of darkness were sown, watered by a toxic brew of fear, shame, and abuse. John Wayne Gacy's early life was far from the idyllic picture of suburban bliss he later projected. He grew up in a household dominated by a harsh and often brutal father, John Stanley Gacy. Their relationship was fraught with tension, a constant battle of wills, a breeding ground for resentment and psychological trauma. His father, a World War I veteran, was a man of rigid discipline, a man who demanded absolute obedience and viewed any sign of weakness with contempt. Young John, by all accounts, was a sensitive child, prone to illness, and perhaps not as physically robust as his father desired. This perceived frailty became a constant source of conflict. His father, a man who believed in corporal punishment as a primary tool of discipline, subjected John to regular beatings, often for the most trivial of infractions. These weren't just spankings, they were brutal, demeaning acts of violence that left both physical and psychological scars. He was called derogatory names, belittled, and made to feel worthless. He was told he would never amount to anything, that he was a disappointment, a failure. Imagine the impact of such treatment on a young, impressionable mind. Imagine the constant fear, the shame, the simmering rage that must have built up inside him, day after day, year after year. The very person who should have been his protector, his source of love and support, was instead his tormentor, the source of his deepest pain. The psychological damage inflicted by his father's abuse was profound. It warped his sense of self-worth, distorted his understanding of relationships, and planted the seeds of a deep-seated anger that would later blossom into unspeakable violence. The constant barrage of insults, particularly those that questioned his masculinity, likely contributed to his later confusion and conflict regarding his sexual identity. But the family wasn't the only source of torment. The societal context of Gacy's formative years cannot be ignored. The 1950s and 60s, for all their outward appearance of conformity and prosperity, were also a time of deep-seated prejudice and intolerance. Homosexuality was not just taboo. It was considered a mental illness, a perversion, a crime against nature. Gay individuals were forced to live in the shadows, to hide their true selves, for fear of persecution, ostracism, and even violence. Gacy, who was grappling with his own same-sex attractions, found himself trapped in this suffocating environment. He was forced to live a lie, to suppress his true desires, to conform to a societal norm that condemned his very being. This internal struggle, this constant battle between his true self and the mask he was forced to wear, created a deep psychological rift, a chasm that would only widen with time. The pressure to conform, to live up to his father's expectations of masculinity, and to hide his true sexual orientation, created a perfect storm of psychological turmoil. It was a pressure cooker of repressed emotions, a cauldron of simmering rage, shame, and self-loathing. If his early life had been different, if he had been nurtured and accepted, if he had been allowed to explore his identity without fear of judgment or violence, would he still have become a monster? It's a question that haunts us, a question that underscores the profound impact of early childhood experiences on the trajectory of a life. It's a question that reminds us that monsters are not always born. Sometimes they are made. They are forged in the crucible of abuse, neglect, and societal prejudice. They are, in a sense, a product of their environment, a reflection of the darkness that exists not just within them, but within society itself. Part 3, The Mask of Sanity, a masterclass in deception. As Gacy transitioned into adulthood, he became increasingly adept at constructing and maintaining his facade of normalcy. He was a master of deception, a skilled manipulator who could project an image of respectability while harboring the darkest of secrets. He learned to compartmentalize his life, to separate his public persona from his private depravity with chilling precision. He married twice, though both marriages were ultimately doomed to fail, likely due to his inability to form genuine emotional connections and his hidden desires. He became a successful businessman, a respected member of his community. He was known for his hard work, his ambition, and his seemingly unwavering commitment to the American dream. His involvement in local politics further solidified his image as a model citizen. He was a precinct captain for the Democratic Party, a man who actively participated in the democratic process, a man who, on the surface, appeared to care deeply about his community. This is a particularly chilling aspect of his deception, that he used the very institutions of democracy, the very foundations of civic engagement, as a tool to further his disguise. He was also a generous philanthropist, at least in appearance. He organized and hosted numerous charity events, raising money for various causes. He was particularly involved with the local JCs, a community service organization. He even received an award for his contributions, further burnishing his image as a pillar of the community. And then, of course, there was Pogo. The clown persona was perhaps his most effective tool of deception. It allowed him to interact with children, to gain their trust, to present himself as a figure of harmless fun. It was a role he played with disturbing enthusiasm, with a level of commitment that bordered on the obsessive. He took pride in his costume, in his ability to entertain, in the joy he supposedly brought to others. The people around him, his neighbors, his colleagues, his friends, even his wives, saw only what he wanted them to see. They saw a successful businessman, a dedicated community member, a fun, loving clown. They saw a man who, despite some personal struggles, was essentially a good person, a contributing member of society. They were completely, utterly fooled. This ability to maintain such a convincing facade for so long is a testament to Gacy's intelligence, his cunning, and his profound understanding of human nature. He knew how to manipulate people, how to play on their expectations, how to exploit their trust. He was a master of social engineering, a con artist on a grand, horrifying scale. But it also speaks to a deeper, more disturbing truth about our society. It speaks to our willingness to accept people at face value, to trust in appearances, to believe what we want to believe. It speaks to the blind spots in our collective vision, the places where darkness can fester, unnoticed, until it's too late. Gacy's success in maintaining his double life for so many years is not just a reflection of his own cunning, it's a reflection of our own vulnerabilities, our own susceptibility to deception. It's a chilling reminder that evil can wear many masks, and that sometimes, the most dangerous monsters are the ones that look just like us. They are our neighbors, our friends, our colleagues. They are the people we trust, the people we never suspect. Part 4, The Unveiling of the Beast. When the laughter stopped, the carefully constructed facade, the meticulously maintained double life, could not last forever. The darkness within Gacy, the repressed rage, the insatiable desires, were growing stronger, demanding release. The seams of his carefully constructed reality began to unravel, and the monster within began to emerge. The first cracks in the facade appeared in the form of minor brushes with the law. There were accusations of assault, of inappropriate behavior, but Gacy, with his connections and his carefully cultivated image of respectability, always managed to escape serious consequences. These early incidents were dismissed, overlooked, explained away. They were seen as aberrations, not as warning signs of a far deeper, more sinister problem. But the darkness continued to grow, and the violence escalated. The monster was no longer content with mere glimpses of power and control. It craved more. It craved complete domination. It craved the ultimate release. The disappearances began in the early 1970s. Young men, mostly teenagers, many of them runaways or from troubled backgrounds, vanished without a trace. At first, the disappearances were not connected. They were seen as isolated incidents, the unfortunate consequences of a transient lifestyle. But as the numbers grew, a chilling pattern began to emerge. These weren't just random disappearances. These were the victims of a predator, a hunter who stalked his prey with cold, calculating precision. A hunter who wore a friendly smile and offered a helping hand. The investigation was slow, hampered by the lack of evidence, by the transient nature of many of the victims, and by Gacy's carefully constructed image of respectability. But the tireless efforts of law enforcement, driven by the growing number of missing persons and the mounting evidence, eventually began to close in on Gacy. He had grown careless. The discovery of a young man's remains on Gacy's property was the turning point. The meticulous facade crumbled, revealing the horrifying truth that lay beneath. The subsequent investigation unearthed a house of horrors, a place where unspeakable acts of violence had been committed. The crawl space beneath Gacy's house became a makeshift graveyard, a silent testament to the sheer scale of his depravity. The arrest of John Wayne Gacy sent shockwaves through the nation. The image of the friendly neighbor, the successful businessman, the fun-loving clown, was shattered, replaced by the horrifying reality of a cold, cold-blooded killer, a monster who had preyed on the vulnerable, who had taken pleasure in the suffering of others. The laughter had stopped. The party was over. The monster had been unmasked. Part 5: The Legacy of Horror, Echoes in the Darkness, and The Trial of John Wayne Gacy was a media sensation, a gruesome spectacle that captivated and horrified the nation. The details that emerged were shocking, disturbing, and almost beyond comprehension. The sheer number of victims, the brutality of the crimes, the cold, calculating nature of the killer, it was a nightmare made real, a descent into the darkest depths of human depravity. Gacy was found guilty and sentenced to death. He spent 14 years on death row, during which time he continued to play the role of the innocent victim, the man wrongly accused. He even took up painting, producing a series of disturbing clown portraits that further cemented his image as the killer clown. His execution in 1994 brought a sense of closure to some, but it did not erase the horror, nor did it answer all the questions. The legacy of John Wayne Gacy continues to haunt us, a chilling reminder of the darkness that can lurk within the human heart. His crimes had a profound impact on American society, particularly on the way we perceive and interact with strangers. He shattered the illusion of safety, the comforting belief that evil is always recognizable, that it always announces itself with clear warning signs. He taught us that evil can wear a smile, that it can offer a helping hand, that it can hide in plain sight. The case also had a significant impact on law enforcement practices, particularly in the investigation of missing persons and serial crimes. It highlighted the need for better communication between different jurisdictions, for more thorough investigations, and for a greater understanding of the psychology of serial offenders. But perhaps the most enduring legacy of John Wayne Gacy is the fear he instilled, the fear of the ordinary monster, the fear of the enemy within. He became a cultural boogeyman, a symbol of the hidden dangers that lurk in our seemingly safe communities. His story has been retold countless times, in movies, in documentaries. He has become a fixture in the true crime genre, a cautionary tale that continues to fascinate and horrify. The image of the clown, once a symbol of joy and innocence, has been forever tainted by its association with Gacy. The term, chorophobia, the fear of clowns, gained widespread recognition in the wake of his crimes. The happy-go-lucky image of the clown became intertwined with something darker, something more sinister. It became a symbol of hidden danger, of the potential for evil to lurk behind a painted smile. But beyond the fear, beyond the horror, there are lessons to be learned from the tragedy of John Wayne Gacy. Lessons about the importance of vigilance, about the need to look beyond appearances, about the devastating consequences of abuse and neglect. Lessons about the power of deception and the fragility of trust. And perhaps, most importantly, lessons about the resilience of the human spirit. Even in the face of unimaginable horror, there is hope. There is the hope that we can learn from the past, that we can build a better future, that we can create a society where such tragedies are less likely to occur. The story of John Wayne Gacy is a dark and disturbing one, but it is a story that must be told. It is a story that must be remembered. Not to glorify the monster, but to understand him, to learn from him, and to ensure that the darkness he represents never again takes hold. We must remember the victims, the young lives cut short, the families shattered by his unspeakable acts. We must honor their memory by striving to create a world where such evil cannot flourish, where innocence is protected, and where the laughter of children is never again silenced by the darkness.